Welcome to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Brian Wood, and in this episode, Mike Klein and myself sit down with Ervin Barkman, who's an organic dairy farmer from Ohio, and he's also doing 100% grass-fed. Now, 100% grass-fed is not something that's new in agriculture, but it is something that both consumers and farmers are wanting to learn more about. So we talked to Ervin about some of the things that he's learned over the years. We do get somewhat technical in this episode, but it is very interesting to find out what works and what doesn't. So we hope you learned something new and hope you enjoy. Thank you.
So this morning, Brian Wood and myself, Mike Klein, are sitting down with Ervin Barkman, who is a grass milk producer in Coshocton County, Ohio. Ervin milks around 60 cows, farms about 200 acres, and has been all grass for 5 years. So Ervin, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I just want to say good morning to everybody here. And this farm is, Dad bought this farm in the early 1970s. And so I guess there's been animals on this farm ever since. And he farmed organically all the time. I remember cultivating corn and doing all that stuff, and he sprayed when he had to, but very little. So by 2000, I started doing most of the work, and I started using more chemicals. I decided to do it the right way. And about 2-3 years later, I found out it wasn't the right way. So we went back to farming organically and went to a grazing conference, listened to Dr. Paul, and got some information, and we just made a real quick switch. All the chemicals went to my brother's place, and
your brother's also in transition now.
Yeah.
So
finally
we
got
him convinced too.
And what was you said you farmed with chemicals for 2 to 3 years. What was the point where you realized, hey, this isn't the way we want to go?
Well, Dad kept asking me, and actually I say chemicals, not really fertilizers, because we had enough manure around here. It was the Roundup. I started using Roundup Ready corn. And actually, a lot of the fields didn't even see Roundup. It was just, these couple fields we did for those 2 years. And I just, I just couldn't do it anymore. It just didn't.
So you weren't raised that way, and
I wasn't raised that way, and
tried to go that way.
And we started having children running around here, and I'm washing the sprayer out up here in front of the shop. It just didn't get it. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
When you went to then move the organic route, were there dairy markets, milk markets available at that time?
I could have been on the truck earlier, but we had some rented ground we was waiting on, and I decided to just keep shipping conventionally till everything's ready to go. So
and then you started shipping to Hood, correct?
Yeah, we started with Hood. It was spring of 2009, and I think by that fall they came around, and was it the DMS guy, and we were supposed to fill out something that Organic Valley might be taking all the Hood contracts or something like that. That's what it was. So we had the option to either look for something else or go to Organic Valley. And we went with Organic Valley, and I'm very glad we did.
So you've been on the Organic Valley truck since 2009, in the fall of
2009.
And then going from Hood to Organic Valley, and then what drove the decision to go to all grass? I know your farm here is pretty hilly, so raising corn on these hills was probably a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it was, but we always grew pretty good corn. We got good corn ground here. I was always I know that that some farmers are doing all grass, and that's just what I wanted to do. It was just make farming more simple. I mean, if you wouldn't have to feed grain. We actually, about as soon as we were on the organic truck, we took the calves off grain. We just could not raise calves on grain and wean them at 2 months of age. Start feeding milk, all they can drink 2 times a day, and we fed them up to 5-6 months, and we just had the nicest calves we ever had. Yeah, we had the young stock off grain before we did the cows.
What happened with your production? Did you see a big drop in the production, or has it come back, or what? Because you weren't feeding a high volume of grain when you went no grain, were you?
No, we cut back on grain. We actually, when we transitioned back in early spring of '09, we actually didn't feed any corn. We fed small grains, and we did that for about a year, and then some organic grower came around and wanted to sell me some open pollinated corn, ear corn, and we took that on that fall, and it helped the production a little bit, but later on we got corn silage from him, so we cut all the grain out and went corn silage. And once that bag of corn silage was gone, we did another year of the extender pallets, and when that year was up, we dropped everything. And no, milk production has it had dropped when we start cutting back on grain, but it came back again.
Well, let's put some numbers to the drop. Where were you at when you were feeding grain to when you pulled grain off, and then how long did it take to get back to the production you were at?
We started in doing some foliars in I think it was in 2010, and that winter we could tell in those 4-H's that we're seeing more milk already. As far as numbers, we might have picked up 1,000 pounds per cow.
Once you started feeding that foliar.
Once we started doing more high quality 4-H.
Well, where were you at when you were feeding grain? 50 pounds a cow, or 40, or where were you?
Yeah, maybe more like 50. Yeah.
And then you dropped to
40.
And then it took about a year or 2 years, it sounds like, to get back up to 50 and get on that foliar program.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your production pretty much matches or is better now than it was when you were feeding grain?
Yeah. Now, way back when Dad was farming, we of course had more production because we had all Holsteins and we had a nutritionist come in. Of course, I'm sure it was higher then, but we had more problems then too. So we don't have any health issues now as far as the cows go and stuff.
I think one of the biggest things that people who are considering doing 100% grass-fed, one of their big concerns is that they're going to see that production decrease. That's why I was asking for ballpark numbers. And I guess I kind of just want to go into some of the things that you changed over the years to eliminate that production decrease, and some of the best practices that you would suggest to people that would be transitioning to 100% grass-fed.
Feed some energy, like molasses or something like that. Get some summer annuals out so you can have feed in the summertime when it's. But as far as people transitioning is actually they ought to look at their 4-H's, see what the quality is of the 4-H's.
That's the big factor is definitely the quality of your 4-H's. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
When the how long were you grass fed before Organic Valley started the grass milk route in the area? Because you didn't do it for the premium. You wanted to go all grass, and then the route came around.
Yeah, I think I was. Well, it's been a year ago now since the first route was on. So I was. I guess it would have been 4 years.
Did you ever think of going back to feeding grain?
No. If this market would drop, I'd still farm this way.
Now you use a TMR. Do you use that to balance your ration with, say, a sorghum sedan and your good hay to try to balance your ration? Is that kind of a tool you think is good?
Yes. You can do more of a balance there. I mean, if you got a real rich, like pure alfalfa, you can't feed cows just alfalfa hay, like real rich stuff. So you got to balance that with sorghum or maybe a first crop grass hay, or you can really balance things out with a TMR. Now it can be done without a TMR. You'd have to feed just a little bit of the good stuff and keep some medium quality stuff there. But it's going to be hard. The best thing is if you could raise something that's like got the grass, you got the clover, you got alfalfa in it. That would be a good feed. And then keep a sorghum sedan bale there just to give them choice what they want to eat.
Are you doing that at all? Are you doing those cocktail mixes of grasses and alfalfa and all this different kind of stuff? I know that's something that's real popular right now. Are you doing that at all on this farm?
Yeah, we try to do the mixes as much as possible, but we're looking into do more on try more of that stuff, more diversity of plants.
Do you feed your molasses and your minerals through the TMR, or do you free choice your minerals?
Most of the minerals are free choice. We do a little bit of minerals in the TMR in the wintertime. And the molasses, we actually feed that individual to cows that we see that need molasses.
How do you notice that a cow might need molasses?
Milk production and body condition.
Okay.
We can. You can just see it. You see the cows every day, and you know which cow needs some more energy.
Did you have any body condition issues? Is it better now than it was at the beginning? Did you see a problem along the way?
It seems to get better every year. There's always a few cows that do put out a lot of milk and they struggle a little bit. Today I got a few of those cows, but we try to dump it to them, the molasses and stuff. So we also feed vinegar in the TMR.
Is that apple cider vinegar?
Yeah, apple cider vinegar.
And that's an energy source, or what does that do?
That's what I've been told. It's energy and it's just good for the rumen.
Do you feed good hay? Like, let's say in April when the cows start going out, do you try to always keep hay in front of them?
Yeah, we do. When we start grazing, we start mixing maybe some more dry hay in with the good hay. And then when we go full pasture, we try to feed all dry hay. It's about a must. They have to eat some dry hay. And it has to be good enough grassy hay that they want to eat it. And then as the summer goes on, we start feeding, maybe more baleage and with the dry hay and try to mix some stuff up with. And the thing is, if you're on grass milk, making grass milk, you have to think that the cow always needs something to eat. If she's in the barnyard for an hour and doesn't have anything to eat, there always have to be a hay in front of them when they come in. Now this time of the year we bring them in the afternoon because I don't like to see cows standing out in the shade. If they're standing in the shade, they're not eating. When you bring them in, they go to feed bunk, they eat. Now we lock the headlocks up in the morning when we bring them in to milk, and then they don't get to the feed bunk till afternoon. They got to go back out and fill their rumen with grass or whatever we're grazing at that time, and then we'll bring them the afternoon. When the temperatures get in the mid-80s, we bring cows in the afternoon.
Yeah, just this week was the first time this year that I saw cows with the tongue out and panting. This week it was stuffy and hot.
That's the other thing. Since we're not feeding grain, I hardly see that.
Do you think the cows handle heat better, that they don't have to digest the grain?
I think they do.
The one thing that I've often wondered with the grass-fed, every farm has a family of cows that might milk good, but it's really hard to keep condition on them. In grass-fed, do you have to cull harder on those cows that you can't keep condition on than you would if you could, dump 15 pounds of grain in front of her to try to get that condition back?
I can't say we necessarily culled any cows because of that. We just try to, in a dry period, just try to get that body condition back. If we can get that back in the dry period, she's going to do better the next lactation and keep it more. But if you can't get it on, yeah, you might as well cull that cow.
Do you rotate the pastures for your dry cows, to try to get that, or do you do that with feed?
Oh no, that's pasture.
That's pasture.
That's pasture. Rotate, yeah.
Have you bred a certain way for grass-fed, or are you still doing pretty much the same program for breeding?
We've changed some genetics. We're still using Holstein, U.S. genetics, New Zealand genetics, same with the Jerseys, and we're bringing in some Norwegian Red and Fleckvieh. We're just looking into those two breeds a little more.
You're not breeding for cow size or anything like that, or just continuing on with same breeding program and just working cows into grass-fed? I guess the reason I'm asking is because a lot of times people will breed with the idea of going towards grass-fed, and it sounds like you're doing it the other way around. You work those cows into a grass-fed program.
We've actually tried something here a couple of years ago. We bought some semen that they were supposed to put out the highest production that the company had, and we had 2 heifers out of that, 5 straws, and the one of them, something happened with the one of them. I got rid of her, and then the other one is still going, and you can actually kind of build that calf the way you feed that calf.
I see.
I mean, you can make that barrel. You just build that calf,
and that's without grain.
Yeah. That's the key to the whole thing. Is get that calf ready to produce milk on an all forage diet.
So did you see struggles over the first 2 years because you had fed calves grain? The first 2 years, I mean, that you you started to go no grain, and you said you had pulled grain from calves a year earlier than you went no grain on the cows, right?
It's been maybe 4 years earlier.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's probably where the key was to...
So you didn't have, when you went to grass-fed, majority of at least your younger cows never had grain?
No, they didn't.
Okay. Do you think that made the transition to grass milk easier because those baby calves weren't fed grain?
I would think it made it easier, yeah.
Do you see, with feeding a milk for 5 to 6 months, do you see the maturity of the animal? Is that animal a lot stronger and more mature when she freshens than if they're weaned younger and fed grain?
Yeah, that's what I was seeing.
So how old are your heifers when you freshen them?
Just a little over 2 years.
Hmm.
I mean, it depends. But no, I keep hearing, they think that farmers say that the heifer should be about 3 years old when she calves if she's not raised on grain. That's too big a heifer for me.
Well, and that usually is a sign that they're probably not making good enough hay.
Well, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned that you started foliar feeding in 2010, and what program are you on, and are you still foliaring like you were?
Back then, we just did very few fields, just see if we could see something, and then we got more aggressive in maybe 2-3 years later. Back then, we started with agri-energy, and then in 2013 we went with advancing.
That's advancing eco-agriculture?
Yeah.
Okay. And how many applications a year do you put on?
We try to get 3 applications on the pasture, and we try every cutting of hay. It doesn't quite always happen, but we try.
What have you seen? Have you seen your forage quality go up significantly since you're on a program like that?
Yeah, we have. I mean, it showed more on the cows than it did almost on paper is what I found. I mean, we've seen some. We took some grain samples last summer, and over the last 3 years, and we see it go up.
I remember seeing one of the samples here a couple of years ago that your fat levels were climbing.
Yeah, we had one last fall. We tested a hay field that was 5.9.
Wow, that'll make milk.
What are you seeing in the cows that with getting on that full year program? What have you seen in the cows that's different than when you weren't?
It takes less forages, and I guess milk production.
So it takes less feed to feed those cows, because I think one of the biggest, one of my big concerns, and in talking to some of the other farmers that would possibly be interested in grass-fed but are on a limited land base. I've always, the general rule of thumb I've used is for grain-fed organics or any farming, it's about 3 acres per cow. And then I've heard for grass-fed, that's to feed 100% of your animals. For grass-fed, it goes to more like 4 or 5 acres per cow, just because you need more feed, more forage to make that happen. And so it sounds like you're saying that because you're on that full year program, you've been able to keep that number more like 3 acres per cow. Are you growing all your own feed for 60 cows on 200 acres?
Almost, especially this year.
Is the 200 acres is with the rented land where you raise some hay?
Yeah, that's figured in.
Okay, that's figured in.
It might be a little over that. I'd have to look, but it's right around there.
And that would be right at about 3 acres per cow. So, I mean, that's encouraging to me that, somebody can increase feed quality and quantity. It sounds like you're able to do both at the same time.
And when you start seeing quality go up, the quantity comes, it's right there. That's
and that always seems to be the trade-off.
Because I remember here a couple years ago, we was harvesting first crop hay, and we had 10 bales to the acre. And back in the early 2000s, I remember 5 bales was good.
And that's rounds or
round bales?
Round bales.
Yeah. That's a 4x4 round. But when you made that 10 bales per acre, this wasn't an August 1st first cutting.
No,
this was actually dairy quality.
It was dairy quality hay. It was, the seed heads were out, but it was a good mixture, and it was dairy quality yet. It wasn't the earliest hay we made, but yeah, it was still in May. If the quality goes up in your forages, it seems like when you're out baling hay, you can't squeeze as much feed in a bale.
Explain that a little
the
further.
stem is solid.
Oh, I see.
And it doesn't compress as much.
Even your grass leaves, I'm not sure how to explain it, but
so when you look at your alfalfa or your clover stem, are yours completely solid?
for the most part. Now we found some that weren't quite full yet, but
Yeah, I actually checked. I have a field that is in third year transition now, new seeding last year. It didn't see any manure, and it was no-till corn and beans since '92. So I put a new seeding in, put some chicken litter on it, and every stem on that stuff is hollow as can be. There's absolutely no nutrients in that soil, so it's going to take a long time to get the nutrients back up in there. But that's pretty cool to see that you very seldom see a hollow one. I very seldom see a solid one. So if I just want to backtrack a little bit, I had talked to you the other day about in April when you start grazing, how you kind of ease the cows into the grazing versus they're out today and now they're out 24 hours a day the rest of the year. So how do you do your early season grazing and going into the full time?
we used to do that. We used to wait and start grazing till about 15th to the 18th of April, and we went out, turn them out one morning, and they were out for the day. But last couple of years, we find it, and I knew that wasn't, quite the way to do it. We start at April 1st, usually right around April 1st, we start grazing. And we just go out in the afternoon when the sun's shining and sugars are up, and the grass is still kind of short, but you don't take it to the ground. And then just a couple hours the first day and maybe the second day, and then we just ease on up to maybe a full day by a week later, and we usually do that for about 2 weeks, just daytime grazing, and then we go out at night. From there on, we go full pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the thinking behind that?
It's the rumen. You're changing the rumen from all stored feed, to very lush green feed. It's good feed,
Sure,
but it needs. I think as short and lush as that pasture is, we need to slow. Now maybe if the pasture would be a foot tall, it probably wouldn't be as big of a change for the rumen.
Mm-hmm. So you're trying to introduce it into the rumen slowly, and try to slow that down with
forages, yeah, mm-hmm. with stored feed.
and I'm assuming the gut bacteria are changing.
Oh yeah,
as well, and you're giving them time to adjust to new feed, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because cows aren't all excited about new feed, so introducing it slowly makes sense.
Well, and it's no different than us. If I eat a bunch of new food, or if I travel to a new place and I eat a bunch of different food than usual, my stomach doesn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think cows are any different.
Well, it's just like, we seldom eat out, and if we do, I'll struggle the next day,
mm-hmm.
just
mm-hmm.
because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so different,
Mm-hmm.
It's
Your body gets used to, especially if you raise most of your own food and stuff.
Absolutely.
It's just like the cow on your farm. They get used to the mineralization of your soil, and the same thing happens to us as humans.
Mm-hmm.
We're not that different than cows.
No.
You mentioned that you are breeding some Fleckvieh. Have you bred some Fleckvieh already?
Yeah, we got the first heifer would be 7-8 months old.
Okay. Did you have any calving issues?
Actually, that's the only calf we had. Now we got more
Okay.
calves coming now, so we'll find out. But what I'm hearing, it's not too bad. Now we try to use calving East bulls,
Mm-hmm.
and the other thing, if you're using Fleckvieh, that's a more beefy type cow. So you want to use a bull that's got top milk production. You gotta look at milk production when you buy Fleckvieh bulls.
If I were to ask you, say there's 5 different guys that are interested in grass milk, and they're just not sure about it, what would your advice be? And I'm guessing it would be go for it. It can be done, but what are the challenges that you would like to let them know that are there? Because I'm sure there's challenges, because it's so easy to just give a little bit of grain, more grain, when your forage quality is down. So what would your advice be to people that are new to grass milk?
My first question would be how much grain they're feeding when they transition slowly. Work on it for a whole year to slow down grain, and even 2 years or even longer. You can't feed 20 pounds of grain and, well, I should say 10 pounds of grain and 20 pounds of corn silage and just right now quit. I just don't think that's going to work. You'd have to, if you do that, you'd have to be feeding all the sugar you're allowed to feed and the molasses you want to feed. So that's the only way I would think that you could possibly do it.
Because guys that are now coming on, starting to ship on the second route of grass milk in the region here, a lot of those started feeding sugar along with their grain, and we're dropping the grain levels slowly and upping the sugar levels slowly. So when that end of feeding grain quit, they had the continuation of the sugar, feeding the dry sugar. Now, do you still feed dry sugar too, or you just feed molasses?
We never fed dry sugar.
Oh, you never fed dry sugar. That seems like there's a lot of people that really like that dry sugar. I don't know. Feeding dry sugar, I'm just not sure about that, but it is pure energy.
Ruben Stolzfus.
Yeah.
He was here Thursday evening of last week, and he's got an energy supplement that I just got it towed Tuesday, and we're just ready to start feeding that. It's molasses, vinegar, and it's got the same ingredients in that Excite does. And he's also got vitamin B12 and some other stuff in there. It's supposed to make the energy multiply once it gets into the rumen. Make the 4-H's she's got in there, utilize those more into an energy source.
So you're going to feed that instead of the Excite?
We're going to try it, yeah. Excite tote's almost empty now, and that's what we're going to do. And if,
What's Excite?
It's a product from Advancing Eco-Agriculture.
And it's molasses.
It's molasses, humate, seaweed, yucca extract. I think that's about it.
Okay.
Might be some enzymes in there.
And going back to the question earlier of what would you tell those 5 guys, and I think one of the things that we talked about a lot earlier that seemed to be what helped you be successful in switching over to 100% grass-fed is getting those calves off grain as soon as possible too. But another question that came up in my mind is, do you think anybody can go grass-fed? Or is there a certain type of farmer that this falls more into the lap of?
I think it would be possible. You'd have to change. It's just like going from conventional to organic. You have to change your thinking and focus on feeding cows.
I had a guy ask me if the switch from regular grain-fed farming to grass-fed, is that switch bigger than the switch from conventional to organic from a management standpoint? Now, he's using the model of the average farm in this area, 40, 50 cows, a grazing dairy, but conventional. So do you think the switch from grain to no grain is as big as your switch was to organic farming from conventional?
I'd say the switch going from conventional to organic was almost more for me than it was for going from grain to no grain. Somebody that's feeding, quite a bit of grain, it's going to be different. Yeah.
You were never feeding high volumes of grain, were you?
I think it was back in 2006 when we stopped the nutritionist, and we went free choice minerals, and we dropped the grain quite a bit. And we were dropping grain already before he left.
Was it price, or was it just you didn't see the benefit in the cows?
Everybody else was doing it that way around here, the grazers, so that's
Okay.
what I was wanting to do.
Sure.
But I think you hit on the perfect thing, was starting with dropping the grain to your young stock. That, I think, is a much bigger key in your situation than I realized.
I've heard people say that you need that grain to build a rumen for a high forage animal later on. Well, how could that be possible?
That really doesn't seem to make sense. But I've had farmers ask me, because of the new grass-fed standards, within 2 years where young stock won't be allowed to get grain. And they asked me if I know of anybody that has calves that don't get grain. I said, yeah, go look at Ervin's. If you don't think you can do it, come look at your calves. Because your calves look almost beefy.
They do. They do.
They look like a calf that is on the cow for 6 months.
That's something we're not doing yet. We're still barrel feeding them. I'd like to get to a point that we can run them with the cows and they can be out every day with the cows. And I'm having such good luck now that I'm almost afraid to make that switch, but we might.
I think that's where the grass-fed is intriguing to a lot of farmers, but you just mentioned it's working for you right now with what you're doing. So you hate to try something when it's working now. I think they look at, feeding some grain, feeding some corn silage. Everything's working so good. We're being profitable. I'm scared to switch, which I understand that.
Mm-hmm. I'm not scared to try that. It's just, when we put the cows across the road with all these calves running along, are they going to come out under the fence on the road, which it's township road? It's not 643. Mm-hmm. So it's just making me nervous to do it.
And they're not just going to drink from mama either. They're going to drink from the whole herd.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Well, we have one member, grass-fed member, who runs his calves with the herd, and they look like fleckvieh.
Yeah.
I mean, they are monsters, but they're not just drinking from mom either. And I don't know, once you have a 6-month-old calf out with your dairy herd, I would love to know how much milk they're drinking, because I've never seen them where they weren't just bloated.
What I'd like to do is have the calves on pasture, rotated pasture, with the barrel feeder. So you can kind of control the intake of milk when they get bigger and older. Like when a calf is 4 or 5 months old, we start weaning for a whole month. She gets less and less milk. So, by the time you're wanting to stop feeding her milk, she's barely getting any milk, and she's ready to go.
Are you just watering it down, the milk, or are you just giving less?
We're giving less. We do feed some warm water, but not all they could drink. And once they know it,
they know you're trying to trick them into drinking warm water.
Yeah, they'll stop. If you got good hay in front of them, or if they're out on grass, I mean, they're not just going to stand there drinking themselves full of water.
Yeah, and you don't see that crash that you see so many times. Calves, they're really starting to eat grain. Now they're being weaned, and they just crash.
That's what was going on when we were feeding grain to our calves. They just crashed. I mean, they were looking so nice, and you took them off that milk, and yeah, just didn't work.
And you don't see that now.
Yeah, no, we don't see that now. Not near as much.
Are you seasonal?
No.
You calve year round, or do you have windows where you?
We try not to calve in July, but we will calve a few by the end of July this year.
So you're pretty much year round calf.
Most of it, yeah.
Okay.
We got a bigger window in the fall and a bigger window in the spring, of course.
Yep.
But it's the price of grass milk. You don't want to have a dry cow longer than you need to. Now, if she needs body condition, it's fine. I mean, we've had cows dry for 4 months or even longer, and that really does a good job on a problem cow that needs body condition.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you have to pay more attention to the body condition without feeding grain, or is it something that is just kind of a natural evolution? Once you go grass, you think you're going to have to watch it. So, but do you look at your cows differently than before you were all grass?
I think I do, because you're watching that body condition, because you're going to be checked once you're on the grass milk truck. Mm-hmm. So, I get a little nervous maybe quicker than I have to, but
I think that's a good thing.
It is. It is.
Because I've been scoring cows the last couple of weeks, and the grass-fed herds, and I can't believe how good body condition a lot of these cows have. Now, I don't know, this is just a theory that I think about when I see grass-fed cows versus grain-fed cows. It feels like when I go scoring a herd that the grass-fed cow will drop in production versus milking off body condition more so than the grain-fed cow. Will keep the production but lose the body condition, where the grass-fed cow. Now, this is just something that I thought of the last couple of weeks looking at these herds. What do you say to that? Because I have absolutely nothing to back it up other than, talking with people and looking at body condition.
I'm wondering if isn't the protein in the diet.
It could very easily be.
The more protein they feed, the easier they're going to milk the meat off the back.
That makes sense, because that would probably be a little bit of a limiting factor in grass-fed is protein. That's the hardest thing for you to find, probably.
Yeah, but if you're on pasture, you don't need extra protein. Because I was feeding that good alfalfa, that low moisture baleage from out west early this spring, just before we went on pasture, and they were milking pretty good on that stuff. And I think it seems like it was a little too much protein, because we were still feeding a little bit of that when we started grazing daytime pasture, and I think that's where I see a little more of those cows that were milking real heavy that are struggling a little bit now, because I think it was just a little too much protein. Because energy, it's all energy. I mean, I don't really worry about protein. I mean, yeah, if you buy hay, you want to supplement a little protein. You got to look at the protein levels in the hay, because if you don't have high protein hay, you want to buy hay that's got it's higher in protein.
Do you, in talking with other farmers in the area, do you think there is a lot more interest in grass milk now than there was a couple years ago?
Oh, I think there is, yeah. And I think that's what we ought to happen is get that cert load on the road if they need it.
He's just trying to give me more and more work.
That's right.
But there's actually, I have 5 people right now that would want on the second load but we want to see how full the 2 loads are and are we needing it. So they're basically on hold right now.
Are a lot of these people people that weren't doing grass-fed not necessarily interested in it, but now that they've seen people do it successfully, they are now interested in it?
Yes. It's a lot of them were intrigued by it, but wanted other people to guinea pig it. And then when it started, like for one, the son is on the grass mill truck, the first load, and now the brother is on the second load, and now the dad wants on too. It was kind of funny because Dad was like, we'll let the kids try this newfangled thing. And I think it is because people are seeing that it is working. The one thing that I think we need to make sure and let people know that are interested, it's a different management style. And you have to know what you're doing, or at least pay attention. The management is key, because if your cows are lacking in energy, especially when it's hot, they're just going to bomb in milk.
Absolutely. You mentioned 5 guys that are kind of interested. Are they still feeding grain?
I don't think any of them are. Maybe one of them was. The one that was still feeding was feeding like 2 pounds a day.
Okay. I was just going to say
because they were all, when they first called me, some of them just had some corn silage left over that they were trying to get rid of, but I know none of them were over 5 pounds of grain a day. Mm-hmm. So which should be pretty easily replaced with sugar if they want to feed sugar. Mm-hmm. And a flat parlor where you've got to feed the cow something to get her to come into milk, sugar seems to work pretty good there. Mm-hmm. So have you ever put any of that Excite or molasses or anything into a water trough?
Yes, we did. We were feeding water like that, molasses and Excite and some vinegar. And this spring, some of the other grass milk guys were having little problems with spotting condition and milk production, and so they called Sylvia, Dr. Sylvia, and she told them to take the molasses out of the water and put it on the hay, so they eat more hay. Because she said you got enough water.
And especially with the way the pastures have been, lots of rain and really watery grass, and the quality is not there.
Yeah, we quit for now, but I'm going to probably do it again here when it. Here in August, sometime we'll start again.
Is Amos, what's he putting in his water trough, Amos Mast?
He's putting in molasses, Excite, and liquid corn repose.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
He says everybody can do grass milk, because he's not foliaring or doing anything like that.
Well, Ervin, thank you so much for doing this with us this morning. We really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping this grass milk market continues to grow and we can add more farmers to it, and I think this is going to be really helpful, especially on the calves, not feeding grain to calves. This is really going to help me when I talk to farmers that are concerned about taking the grain away from their calves. So,
and I've been a little bit skeptical of the 100% grass-fed, that everybody could do it, but I think there are ways, and thanks for telling us all the information. There's a lot to get from this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Ervin.
Yeah, thanks, Ervin.